What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 141 of Nintendo Noise, Flip Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Bing Bing Wahoo.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't like that. I'm trying new ones like we said about on the other show it was. I don't like that one, so we're skipping that one. Next week will be something different.
The Bing
Whatever.
Bing's a little weird. The Wahoo, I'm like, okay, it's Nintendo.
That's the coins. You get the coins. You
Yeah.
go Bing Bing. Then you go Wahoo.
Yeah, I get it, but I feel like it doesn't sound like it. Just sounds like you're like maybe having an episode or something, you know?
It's a rare treat for me to be on Nintendo Noise, and here I am just immediately fumbling it.
It's like, Max, do you smell popcorn? Do I need to call someone?
Is it popcorn? I always think it's burnt toast, but I cook my popcorn perfectly.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
You know.
Maybe you're right. Oh, okay. See, now is something wrong with me? Call a doctor. Anyway, nothing's wrong on this week's episode because we got some exciting stuff to talk about. Nintendo has acquired former Embracer studio Shiver Entertainment, which is the first new studio that they have acquired in quite some time.
Only a couple of years, actually. If you mean you can, at the rate the rest of the industry was acquiring stuff, it's been quite some time.
Sure.
But I think they acquired Next Level Games in 2022, I guess. So that's not that long ago.
Okay. You're right. I forgot about that one. I forgot about Next Level Games because I was thinking the last one before that was
Monolith? I don't know when that was.
Yeah, which I mean I think was like at either the tail end of the Wii U or the beginning of the Switch generation. It was.
I think it might have been slightly before. Looking it up here, they were bought by Nintendo in 2007.
Okay,
after,
a while.
Right at the beginning of the Wii, and they were owned by Bandai Namco for only a year before then. Oh no, hang on, but Namco was owned them for like almost 10 years before that, so it's basically the same thing, really, isn't it? So yeah, Nintendo's last big acquisition, I guess. There's probably one we're missing, but it seems like 2007 might have been the last one. Sorry, before 2000.
Point being, not something they make a habit of, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like there are plenty of studios that you think of as having a really long association with Nintendo that they don't own or have, not acquired or, have even seen gone out of business and they didn't do anything to step in, right? So seeing them acquire a studio is certainly outside the norm, right? And I think it kind of ties into something we've seen them talking about a lot in the last, year or change or whatever, right? Whether it was officially or through rumors that, they kind of see that game development is taking longer and that they need more resources if they want to be able to, maintain a really strong, steady output of high quality software on the next console. And, obviously that was such a big part of the success of the Switch, right? Was having really, really high quality software that was always coming out and not having to deal with the kind of software droughts that I think the 3DS and Wii U both became known for at different times, or the Wii at the end of its life cycle, right?
Yes. God, yeah, the Wii was so sort of like, it had some bangers, but it had few bangers, like few and far between.
Well, and it was like the last couple of years got rough, like there was that point where it's just like, man, there's just not anything exciting coming out,
Yeah. Well, that's because they were planning for a massive Wii U launch, obviously. That was what that was.
We saw how that went.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Shiver, if you're not familiar. So they're a team based in Miami, Florida, which I believe makes them only the second Nintendo studio based in the States, right? Because Next Level is
you're forgetting Retro Studios based out of...
I said other, the only other.
Oh.
Yeah, Retro's in Texas.
Oh, Next Level. Sorry, I thought Next Level were...
Are they American? I thought they were European. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, do you know what? They might be Spanish. This is a lot of Googling this episode.
A lot of Googling this episode.
Canadian.
So there we go. All right. So I was on point that they were
Europe
not American.
The Europe of the Americas, right?
Of course.
Canada.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So what Shiver is kind of known for, right, is they've been around since 2012, and they are one of those studios that they're like a hired gun more often than not, right? They come in and they do ports of successful games to new platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most recently, they worked on porting both Hogwarts Legacy and Mortal Kombat 1 to Nintendo Switch within the last, year or two, I guess.
Yeah. So infamous then, not known for, infamous.
Yeah,
For
infamous for
porting
is probably a good way to put it, right? Because Mortal Kombat 1 infamously got a 3 out of 10 from IGN, which is pretty rough.
Yeah.
Hogwarts Legacy, my understanding is that it fared a bit better.
Yeah, they just lost a chunk of. I think they had to cut out the open world element of it, and you just sort of travel from place to place, if I remember rightly, or it's sort of sections as opposed to one open world. So, I mean, you are putting these games on a much weaker system that's like a tenth the size of the other consoles, including a controller and a screen. So there are cutbacks that have to be made, but maybe Mortal Kombat 1, at that point, it's like, why make it if those are the compromises you
right?
have
Which
to make?
I think to me, the reason I bring that up is that I think that probably has more to do with the decision to port that game rather than the studio's inability to create a good port, right? It's like I don't think that Mortal Kombat 1 probably should have run on Switch, right? So
yes, yeah.
So I think I kind of wanted to add that context because I think that being their kind of most recent outing, it doesn't reflect on them particularly well. But I think I could understand why Nintendo would not look at that and be concerned and actually look at that and be like, well, hell, you got it to run it all. That's pretty good,
Yeah.
So, I guess take it with a grain of salt if you want to. But some other stuff that they've been credited on was Mortal Kombat 11 prior to that. And then they also were credited on Scribblenauts Showdown and Mega Pack back in 2018. So, a couple ports under their belt. To varying degrees of success, but
yeah, that list of games, it says to me more not that they're being hired because, like, they did, like how is it Nixies that Sony bought? Did they buy Nixies because they were like, these guys have done great jobs for us in the past, yeah, so we're going to buy them. They're going to make our thing. This feels not like Nintendo were like, these guys are so good at porting games to the Switch. They've had such a good success with it. Let's buy them because they're doing really well. It sounds like it's more like, well, we need to port more games to the Switch, and this company does it. So there's almost like a need for the porting as opposed to them being bought based on merit.
Well, and knowing that like Embracer Group has been aggressively selling off assets, right, to like cover their ass. Like, I mean, there's a chance that Nintendo was just like really happy with the deal that they were able to get here, and that like that was enough. My understanding is it's an undisclosed, or no, maybe it is actually, because so what we know is that this stock is being sold at $10 a share, but I don't see.
Maybe I'll buy me some stock in.
Buy yourself a studio.
Embracer, yeah.
But yeah, I don't see mention of like what the actual studio is gonna cost overall, but basically what you're looking at here is Nintendo is going to have 100% stake. It's going to become a completely owned subsidiary, and in their kind of like document stating the kind of intent to purchase the subsidiary, the kind of end of it is this part where it says future business projection, and it says the acquisition will have only a minor effect on Nintendo's results for this fiscal year, which to me, speaks to the idea that the acquisition probably was not a big investment for them, right? So the idea that, you look at this studio and you're like, hey, they were able to get these two AAA, quote unquote, next gen games, right? I mean, I guess not so much with Hogwarts. That's more of a last gen title. But they were able to get those games running on Switch, and even though they, maybe had compromises or they didn't, maybe live up to expectations, that's like something that they do need to they need to get done, right? And the idea that that's something that they could, leverage this studio for as they're moving into the Switch 2 era, and they need to fill software gaps, or they, maybe want to try to bring more third-party titles to Switch 2 at the beginning of its life cycle, like they did with stuff like Skyrim and L.A. Noire and some of those kind of games early on. That does make sense to me,
It is interesting if that is the case, that in-house porting of third-party games. So it's not bring your game to Switch. It's we'll you have your game. Let us bring it to our platform
it'd be like
for you.
Nintendo publishing the ports of games, which is something they've done, and it's not unheard of for that to be a thing. It's just not super common anymore.
Yeah, the fact that it's not common makes me wonder if this is actually not intentionally, not entirely, we want third-party games. Maybe it's more like, well, we want to bring, Switch games to the Switch too. However,
or other old games, right? Like stuff like, like they're doing with like Luigi's Mansion 2, right? And like, we've seen a lot of that on the Switch where it's like, let's take this game from a previous generation and slap a new coat of paint on it and sell it for $60.
Which, when you put it like that, they've done it. They can do it. They know how to do it. So sort of maybe the question, maybe now I'm wondering if that is the case because they already do it, right?
Yeah.
So why would they have to hire another team for it?
Well, because again, I think it's less about them not being able to do it as much as it is that they need more development power, right? That it's like in the current slate of studios that Nintendo has is not enough to keep up with the demand that there is for high quality software from Nintendo. And I think that when you look at, like how many IP Nintendo has now that are really healthy, right? Like, I mean, not only all the old reliables, right, have continued to be bankable, right? Like, the last Mario Kart is the most successful one of all time, right? Like, the last 3D Mario was the most successful one of all time. The newest 2D Mario is on track to potentially become the bestseller of its ilk. That's all great, but then it's like you saw Zelda become a bigger seller than it's ever been before. You saw Metroid become a bigger seller than it's ever been before, and a lot of those titles already are dependent on studios that they don't own and they don't have any stake in their future, right? Like the last 2D Metroid was made by a studio that they don't own. The last 2D Zelda was made by a studio that they don't own, and the idea that maybe they will acquire some of these studios that they have had relationships with that have produced games that were really big sellers for them, and try to look for opportunities to acquire other studios like this at a deal that they can bring in and bolster up the talent over time. I think that's probably just where they're at, because I think when you look at Nintendo's success, it's never been about like third party. Not in the modern era, right? It's their software that sells stuff, and then carefully curated partnerships with indies and stuff. But like it's rarely the next big game from Bethesda or Rockstar or whatever that is coming to Nintendo Switch and lighting the world on fire. So it's like I think if you're Nintendo and you're like, hey, like we've realized that the key to us moving hardware is killer software, and who makes better software than us, and we have this incredible stable of IP, and we have more games people want than we have studios that can work on them, right? Like I think in a perfect world, right, you probably have a 3D Mario and a 2D Mario and a 3D Zelda and a 2D Zelda, and the same for Metroid and the same for Donkey Kong, and like that right there is already 12 games in active development, right? Like they don't have that many studios, and when you look at the fact that like like one of their biggest IP, right, like of the last generation was Animal Crossing, and that's the same team that works on Splatoon. So it's like, okay, so while they worked on Splatoon 3, like what's happening with Animal Crossing? Like you're nowhere on a follow-up to your second most successful game of the previous generation, or you're maybe a lot less far on it than you'd like to be. Like as we know that game development is it's more expensive and it takes longer than it used to, and that's just how it is. So with that in mind, it's like I think them wanting to shore up those numbers and have just more teams that they can throw on projects, especially projects that are maybe lower priority and like are kind of like stopgaps, like getting another version of Wind Waker HD done, right? Like so that you can port a port. It's like has that not happened just because there hasn't been a team that can do it? Like who knows?
We've seen like where these ports have come out. For example, we've had Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze come over to the Switch. We've had Metroid Prime come over to the Switch in a remastered form. But in that time, Retro hasn't been able to make a new game because of that. They've been working on Metroid Prime 4, but that's only since 2019. So they've been a bit tied up doing that. you can also see that with Mario Odyssey was the last 3D Mario game to come out. Since then, we've had the 3D World sort of the new stuff for that. And again, they were probably working on that port and on the Bowser's Fury stuff, but they haven't then had a chance to release another 3D Mario because they've been working on that. So they must be stretched quite thin to not be able to bring these ports over and also release new games in those same series. So having a team that is capable of doing that is going to be handy for Nintendo. It means they can probably free up, a lot of the time when people say things like, for example, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, and the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. People, when The Lost Crown was announced, people were going, well, why are they making this when they could be remastering this or working on the remake of the game we want? And people were responding to that saying, well, these are two different teams. This game existing doesn't take away from the Sands of Time because it's a completely different team. Whereas with Nintendo, there are teams that work on very specific games, and maybe that time does take away from other games. Maybe making Bowser's Fury did take away from them being able to work on Mario Odyssey, or maybe that was made up of old Mario Odyssey ideas, because there's a lot of parallels between the two. Not that I'm at all an expert on the Nintendo's development practices, but it does feel like, for every time there's a port, it does feel like we are losing a game in some ways, especially when...
I think to your point, right, like, no matter how you slice it, right, like, every game you decide to make means another game doesn't get made. That's just true. There's a finite amount of resources to go around, whether it's development resources or money to invest in new games, right? And, you've seen them outsource a lot of that work. Like the Super Mario RPG remake was like not made in-house, right? Like that's an outside, that's an exterior team. Like look at even Smash, right? Like Smash has been made, is made by Bandai Namco now, and Sakurai, who's somebody who doesn't work for Nintendo, So, like I think it makes sense to your point that they would want to maybe get some teams that are dedicated to just doing ports and just doing remasters and just taking old games and recontextualizing them, and let the Nintendo EADs and EPDs and the kind of A teams of the world, right? S teams of the world, like focus on the new games and the new stuff and the new IP.
Makes me wonder, this acquisition happening now on the, seemingly we're just waiting on Switch 2 news at this point. We're waiting for them to announce it. We know it's sort of going to be announced within the next year. This team isn't going to have time to release a full port in a year, right? Hogwarts Legacy took about a year, but they were probably working on that beforehand. It was already announced, I think, before the game actually came out. And I know that they also worked on porting it to previous gen consoles. It came out, Hogwarts Legacy was a series and a PlayStation 5 game that they imported backwards onto previous gen and then also onto the Switch. That probably took a chunk of time. They were probably
I don't know though, because it's like if you look at this timeline, right? Like they worked on Mortal Kombat 11, and then Mortal Kombat 1 and Hogwarts Legacy both came out in 2023. So that would mean that
that's true. That is 3 games in a year.
Or like
we don't even know how big the team is, right?
No. So it's like I don't know. Like the idea that they could, maybe not for launch, but within launch year is like maybe not crazy. It's like it depends on how big the project is, I guess. But like. We've heard that rumor that they were going to do like that up-res like Breath of the Wild, like something like that probably doesn't take much more than a year, right? To
have a team to just upgrade things to the new...
To upgrade a game to 60 FPS, right, is like, I don't know, like, is that crazy? Probably, but like in maybe 2 years it's not, right? Like, the idea that like Nintendo's going to reveal the Switch 2 by March of next year, that doesn't mean it's coming out by then, right? Like it could come out midway through next year, end of fall of next year or whatever, right? And like if that's the case, then they've got 18 months before it would even be launch window. So it's like that's not unheard of that you could get something like that done in maybe 2 years or whatever. Like maybe it's Wind Waker HD, right? Like that's something that's like that game's already made. All you need to do is get it to run on a new platform. It's like that doesn't seem insane.
I can't imagine the Switch 2 being that different of a platform, and because it's still Nvidia, it's still the same architecture, I believe, unless they're changing that up, and that might require some work. But
no, I mean it is a new Nvidia chip, so
yeah, that's true. Yeah, there could be differences there.
But like how much, right? Like it's like I don't know. Like I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Because it's like we know that the average AAA game takes like around 6-7+ years to develop now, but it's like a port of an old game where you already have the code. It's like that's such a different thing, you know? It's like think about how long it took them to make like The Last of Us Part 1, right? Where it's like
that is a lot of new assets, you know.
Yeah, but it's like it didn't take that long.
No, yeah.
Cuz it's like so much of the so much of the conceptual, you know, all the conceptual work, all you know, like you know what you're making. It's just you have to then just go make it, right? Rather than like let's spend 2 or 3 years figuring out if this game's fun before we actually get the thing made, you know? So I don't know. It's such a different beast, but I think even if they're not ready to do something right away, it's probably like, you know, again, just part of that strategy that they are seemingly starting to pursue of like wanting to line up more things over a longer period of time so that they don't run the risk of hitting a point where there are gaps, right? Because it's like that's, I think, been a huge part of the Switch's strength is that like every year there's been at least 1 or 2 big games.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend there's not been droughts in the Switch's life cycle. Even as someone who, I mean, I used to keep a list of all the games coming out for Switch, and I would update that list, and I'd have like a big picture that I used to post on Reddit. And I think Nintendo stole my format for that, but I'm not gonna get into that yet because my lawyers are still working on it. But that was like there was a point we're quite early in the Switch's life cycle. I think we're before Yoshi's, whatever the most recent Yoshi game was. Where I was like, oh yeah, it's cool looking ahead at all these things that are coming out, but there was actually nothing coming out at the time except Snake Pass. So that was quite a dark time. But for early adopters, we and I guess we are the people that are going to feel that the most, as we're likely going to be early adopters.
But it's also like you have to I think of like what a drought is in context, right? Because it's like on the Wii U, you would have years, right, where it was like, oof, like this is bleak, right? Like there's maybe one big game out this year, maybe. Right? Whereas like I think even on the like you said, like as an early adopter, yeah, we were all sitting there like clamoring for new stuff, but that's not because there wasn't things to play. In the first year of Nintendo Switch, you had ARMS, Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8, and Mario Odyssey, and Splatoon 2. Like,
oh mate, that first year was incredible. I'm not knocking on the first year at all.
No, and that's more my point though, right? It's like, I hear what you're saying, and I feel like, you know, when even a year that strong has moments where you're like, fuck, I need something else. It's like, that's why they're doing this, right? It's like they want to get to a point probably where they have like a big thing every quarter, right? Or a big thing every like other month or whatever. Like that's probably the end goal here is like, you know, releasing multiple games that sell 2-3 million copies a year and then 1 or 2 that are like a breakout success, you know?
You're making me a little bit worried, actually, because when I think about it, we've just had Zelda. Xenoblade's finished. We've just had basically a Splatoon. We've had a load of these like big launch year games that we'd be like, oh yeah, another one of those would be cool. Have just happened. I wonder what. Sorry, I was going to move a second. I wonder what that launch year is actually going to look like. Considering a lot of the huge ones are taken, you know.
Yeah, and I think we have a couple of those answers, right? Like I would say a 3D Mario is probably a good bet, right? We just talked about that with Chris last week during the State of Switch survey, breakdown that we do with him every year, where the number one game that everybody's looking forward to on a Switch 2, like it was like 63% of people or whatever were like a new 3D Mario, like a successor.
Where the fuck were the Metroid Prime 4 people in the survey?
It was on the list, but not number one.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and Metroid Prime, right, is another good shout out of like that will probably be like I could see that being a cross gen one, you know.
Fucking hope so.
So I mean, we have new Metroid, new Mario. I think those are both safe bets. We have that Pokemon Legends ZX game that's supposed to be out 2025. ZA.
Awful name.
Yeah, ridiculous, but whatever. So you got that. That right there is already pretty solid. But I think the idea of like maybe you have a 2D Zelda ready, right? Not unheard of. The idea
Ports,
that
you just do
a port, right, of Wind Waker, like that could be one. And then there's been that rumor that there's like the Donkey Kong projects in development for like years, right? That they made a team within, I think it was EAD, it might be EPD, that is just supposed to be developing Donkey Kong projects, and the idea that maybe we're getting a new Donkey Kong Country, right, to coincide with the new, land at Universal, and there's going to be the Donkey Kong movie, and they're pushing like the Donkey Kong Country branding again. So I don't think that would be crazy. But I also think like a 3D like Donkey Kong 64 successor is like something that also feels like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a shame they took that off Retro if that's the case though, because Retro they just nailed it. They just really got it, and they've got so many fresh ideas that they put into that game. But hey, they're also
we needed it on my Metroid though.
So yeah,
so it's like, what are you gonna do?
They already came in and saved that.
It's exactly why we need more teams. I think it's just like they have too many IP that people want more frequently, and if they want to do that and they want to have every Mario character has their own series, and there's 2 versions of Mario and Zelda and Metroid and Donkey Kong. It's like, yeah, I mean, we clearly need more development power.
Yeah, I think there's been a thing throughout the Switch's life cycle where when a port comes out, I'm going to use Donkey Kong again as an example. When Tropical Freeze came out, there was people were like, oh, this must mean we're getting another Donkey Kong game. This must mean this is just a tide us over between the next Donkey Kong game. Didn't get that Donkey Kong game. Oh, Super Mario 3D World's coming out. That must be a port just to tide us over for Odyssey 2. Odyssey 2 never came. Oh, Metroid Prime Remaster's coming out. That must mean we're getting 2 and 3. That didn't happen. Or hasn't happened yet, let's say. And I think a lot of these are, we're getting a remake of Link's Awakening. It must mean, yada, 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 yada. And I think that a lot of that is down to just not having enough teams. Or Nintendo reads the comments and they're like, nah, I don't want our audience to be correct. So they'll just, we've got to keep them guessing. So they just cancelled all these projects.
Well, there's something to be said for like saturation too. Right? Like I think Nintendo is smart about not giving us too much of something so that you get sick of it and it has go away heat. Like they want you to always be wanting something. But I think it is kind of weird that it's like, oh, Link's Awakening was a big success, and then like, well, what about like Oracle of Ages and Seasons, right? Like, doesn't that seem like a no-brainer? And it's like probably, but also it's like, who's the team that did that one?
Sorry, which one's
Link's Awakening? Is that?
Oh, Grezzo?
That's Grezzo, right? Like they're working on apparently an original IP now, so it's like, did we not get that because they didn't want to do it? Nintendo doesn't have anyone else to do it. It's just like,
Give us Ever Oasis 2. Give us Ever Oasis 2, and I'm happy with that. I didn't even play the first one, to be fair. But it came out on the 3DS too late. It came out in 2017. I was already done with the 3DS. That's a lie because Metroid Prime came out Metroid 2. Oh my god, Samus Returns came out like 2 months after that game came out, and I still bought and played that. So, whoops.
So one other thing I did want to call out was from Nintendo's post about this, right? Their press release. There was language in there that I thought was interesting. They said, going forward, even after it becomes a part of the Nintendo group, Shiver's focus will remain the same, continuing commissions that port and develop software for multiple platforms, including Nintendo Switch. So that's interesting to me because I think there's 2 ways you can interpret that. One of them is that they're being vague because multiple platforms means Nintendo Switch and the successor to Nintendo Switch that we're not ready to talk about publicly yet, right? I think that's this Occam's razor most simple interpretation. But the fact that they say their focus will remain the same, continuing commissions that port and develop for multiple platforms, does feel a little bit like, oh, they're just going to be business as usual. Like they're not going to even, because it says like even after it becomes part of Nintendo. It's going to keep doing its thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, it could just be like because it was so cheap, they were like, well, we could get them to do this for us, but also while they're not making things for us, they could still be, they could still be out doing stuff.
Or just like developing multiple versions of a game at the same time, right? Where it's like, hey, like you can use our studio and we'll port it to, you put it out on PlayStation, we'll port it to Switch and Xbox for you, right? Or whatever. I don't know. Maybe. But I think the other way you could interpret that is that maybe they already have a bunch of projects that are in development and Nintendo's going to let them finish them, and they'll be publishing games on other platforms technically or whatever.
And is that published by Nintendo at that point then? Is that Nintendo publishing on Xbox?
I would think no, because it would be like for like Mortal Kombat, right? Like the publisher's still Warner Brothers. It's just that's the developer in the same way that like NetherRealm is the developer of the actual version.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
So I think it would just be the developer is a Nintendo-owned studio, which, like, fair enough. But yeah, it's weird because it's like, why would you buy the studio if you're just gonna have them continue to operate as like a third party? Like, you'd think that they would, you'd want to just have them work on Nintendo projects, but
we don't know how cheap they are, do we? I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, I really
that could be.
That really is probably a big motivating factor. Is that if they got a good deal, then it's like, sure, why not? But like, I don't know.
Yeah, capital stock USD $10. That might not mean per share. That could mean the whole studio cost $10. You never know.
That would be something. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I guess I could see it going either way, right? Like, obviously, like, never count out Nintendo to make an unprecedented move, but that does feel odd to me, the idea that they would acquire the studio and then have them like still develop games for PlayStation or Xbox when they could have them focus on more games for Nintendo, Yeah. Unless they're continuing to just do third-party stuff.
Yeah, they could just have commitments, Yeah, if they only if they don't work on Nintendo owned stuff, then that makes sense. But it could also be like, oh, yeah, you can buy us. However, we currently have deals signed with, studio. Therefore, we need to complete these before we're actually able to become. Then it could be that they announce, oh, from this date on, they're only working on Nintendo stuff, or maybe they don't ever formally announce it. But we only just start seeing Nintendo stuff come out all the time.
Yeah, there's like definitely a chance that the reason they worded it this way is just because like legally they have to, right? Because there's some other agreement and they don't want to create tension.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is very much a business notice. This isn't like a, hey, in part of a direct, we're acquiring this and they're doing this. It's just like a straight announcement of this is exactly what's happening, and therefore there's probably more to be read into that, but maybe we need to give it a bit of time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So we did get a question from Andrew Valentine who said name their first 3 ports to Switch 2. And I think we kind of covered a lot of the subject, like the candidates that I think are probably most obvious right out the gate. But like, if I had to guess, I think Wind Waker would make sense. I think maybe even seeing them work on like Metroid Prime 2 and 3, I think could make sense. I think it's like a lot of the kind of usual suspects, if I had to, right? It's stuff that is going to be an obvious swing and hit.
Now, Andrew, I'm going to be honest here. I got choice paralysis the moment I read this question, and I still cannot think of one because I've got like 50, 100,000 running through my head. So I'm not going to answer this because I feel like I covered some of it before. Because every time I'm like, oh, what could it be? I'm like, oh, there's like so many video games out there. So I look forward to seeing what it is that they do. Oh no, sorry about that. But
you're killing it today, bud.
Yeah, I'm really I'm on the ball. I'm on the ball.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave that one there for the day. I think I'm interested to see if this is the sign of more things to come. I think more than anything, like, is this something that Nintendo did just because it was such a stupid good deal, or are they, in the same way that we heard that they were making partnerships with certain studios to work on their games, right? They were like in deep conversations with 3 different studios to have development partnerships. Is this something that we might see them start doing, of purchasing these smaller studios that they can trust with some of their more minor projects?
I think this is something that we will probably hear more about during the next investors meeting. A question will be, you've acquired this studio, what are your plans? And maybe we'll get more of a candid or formal sort of introduction to what it is that they plan on doing with them when they're asked to by investors, when they don't have to right now. So I think what we've got 3 months, I guess, May, June, July. So maybe end of July. I think it's beginning of August. They have
somewhere around there. We like literally just had one, right? So it'll it'll be, I guess, August.
Yeah, maybe I'll come back then and make a pig's ear of that as well.
Sounds good. I'll hold you to it. All right, so we got a bunch more Nintendo conversation to get into in just a minute here, but before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of May. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Ty the Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. remember, if you want to go check out those sister shows, if you want to show your support, if you want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes, or if you want to write into the question block like a bunch of fine folks did this week that we're about to jump into their questions, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, however you choose to get involved or show your support. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nintendo Noise. All right, so I want to start with this question from Trendy Brendy. It's a two-parter. One of them is a follow-up from an episode. I think it was 2 episodes back now. Trendy Brendy said, "I need to set the record straight. Pete slandered my name offhandedly 2 episodes ago, saying I'm a Hey Pikmin fan, and I would never." So I actually went digging through the Discord to find out who had said this. Because I couldn't remember. Clearly, I thought it was Brendy, and it was actually none other than Olaf, who said, "Gosh, I loved Hey Pikmin. Many people hated it, but I really enjoyed it, and it even made me curious about Pikmin 4." So there you go. It was Olaf who loved that one. Sorry about that.
You eating your words right now? Are you having a slice of humble pie live on? I've never seen you admit you're wrong.
Yeah.
In fact, you edited something out of an episode we did last week,
Max,
because you made an incorrect comment.
Max, I'm never wrong. So, that's why you don't ever
developed
hear me.
Overwatch?
It was Blizzard. What do you mean? What do you mean who developed it? It's Blizzard Entertainment.
Don't think I didn't immediately go and check if that was in the episode or not. Don't think I didn't immediately check, Pete.
Yo,
I'm calling you out.
Look, your boy misspoke, right? Like, sometimes you misspeak, but let's think. You don't ever hear me retract anything because I'm never wrong. That's why.
Yeah.
All right?
To err is human.
And I erred, so I'm acknowledging it. It's just some people make more mistakes than others. That's okay. All right, so number 2 from Trendy Brendy. I am a Super Mario Land 1 defender. Great Nintendo Switch Online edition that honestly I didn't know wasn't there already. I know the game is weird, Mario is so small, the shooter levels, etc. But man, it was my first handheld Mario game and it was a hand-me-down from my dad. And the music is great. Did you dip back in to play it? If not, what Game Boy NSO games would make you boot up the app again besides Pokemon?
I played Super Mario Land 1, sorry, that was one of the games I had on my Game Boy as a kid. And the point there of, I didn't know it was already on the Game Boy Nintendo Switch thing is just highlights my point that Nintendo Online is bad and that the library of games is bad. The fact that it's taken this long to get something that should have clearly been there from the beginning. We're approaching the end of the Switch's life cycle and there's just some clear misses, no Pokemon games, etc. But I'm not going to get on that soapbox today. I'm going to wait until there's a week where I can actually just come on and just chat shit about Nintendo Online for 45 minutes.
At the end of the Switch life cycle, we can do a retrospective.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so I haven't dipped back into it yet. I am also a fan of the land games though, and I think that they're really fun, and they've got a lot of like things that are just unique about them, Yeah, and definitely
they noticeably improve as well. They get the second one is clearly better than the first one in like visual style as they sort of got to grips with the Game Boy more. Because I remember the first one really feeling like it was like a really, really pared down Mario game because it was just like the black and white, the little black like dots and stuff,
Yeah, and like he called out like some of the stuff is like the shootings. It's like there's funky things about it, but I kind of like that, It's like I think I always like the like weird entries, and like that's what I like about Link's Awakening is like it's odd.
Yeah.
It's like it's so different than all the other ones, and like that gives it a quality that I think makes it feel special. Yeah,
Metroid 2 is the black sheep of the Metroid sort of franchise, the main franchise at least, because it's the Game Boy games are different. I think it's nice that because Mario games, there was a period where they were all the same, and I've said that publicly on this show many, many times. But there was also a time where you didn't know what you were getting. Mario
Everyone
1,
was
Mario
totally
2,
different.
Mario 3 are completely different. Super Mario World is completely different. So it is nice to get sort of a mix up of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's not one that I've had time to double back to since it came to NSO, but I definitely will at some point. It's just a matter of like timing right now, and like I guess like what I'm in the mood for. I haven't really been itching for a new platformer since I played a lot of them earlier this year, and to answer the other part of it of other games that would make me dip back in, I don't know. It's tough because I think now that I have the Steam Deck, that's kind of diminished a lot of my enthusiasm for the NSO experience because it's like whatever game I want to play from that library, like I can just play.
Yeah,
like I've dipped
I really
back
resent
into
paying for online now.
And it's like even that, like, I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing where like I think there is value in NSO. Like I don't think it's really like a bad deal per se because it's very cheap. But I'm
Mhm.
very much with you where I think it's half baked and I don't think it's the best version that it could be. And I think if they had put more work into it, that they could have charged more for it the entire life
Yeah.
cycle too, which is like I look at it more of a missed opportunity than something that like isn't worth it because it's like if you go and play those games, there is a good library and they function fine and whatever. But it's
Yeah.
like for somebody like us, where it's like I'm more of an enthusiast and I have MU deck and I play with mods and fan games and ROM hacks and it's like it's a little basic and for it to like
Yeah.
be missing key games that you would want to go play, like Mario Land or like, Pokemon,
Any
is kind of
Pokemon
like,
game, yeah.
yeah, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, what are we doing here, right? Like, these are the
Yeah.
games that you own. Like, I can understand why I don't maybe get like Mega Man, right, on the NES, but
Mhm.
it's like, also, I don't, like, on the other hand, like, you should probably just spend the money to make it more valuable and then charge us more.
If you total up all that you spent every month on Nintendo Online though, and then you think about the value of that versus, I don't know, Game Pass. Let's just say,
Yeah.
just to compare sort of something to something. I do think that the trickle of games has not been particularly great,
No.
and so there have been months where either we don't get anything new, or when we get something new, it's like, what is that? And I'm sure there are some people that are happy about that, but I also just think that you're paying monthly for that, and once you've done it,
I think
right?
the
To
other
have
thing
a
that's annoying is that
constant
there's no
access to that.
cadence to it, right? Like
Hmm.
on Game Pass or like with games with gold or like PlayStation, like there's a cadence of like new games come at this
Yeah.
rate and the games, you can claim these games for this amount of time.
Hmm.
Like the fact that it's kind of like, oh, you got nothing for like 3 months and then here's 3 games and you're not excited about any of them. Guess you'll have to wait 6 months to see if there's something else you want to play. And it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
feel
And
good.
when they announced like the what was it? Game Boy Advance, the Mega Drive, and what was the other one they did at the same time? Was it just those two?
Genesis, yeah.
Oh, N64. That was it.
Oh, right.
When they did all those ones, and it was like more games coming soon, and it's not really been a trickle to so much so that's a separate subscription that also has less, doesn't have much value compared to the. And they also never added any more expansions to it. They never added any more
They
season passes
did,
to it.
just
Or your
not
own.
not not enough. They added some more.
What did they add? We got the Mario one. Came with started with the Animal Crossing one. They added Splatoon 2
And Mario
years
Kart.
after Splatoon 2 to get Mario Kart, and that I'm pretty sure that's it because there's no Fire Emblem Three Houses. There's no like Tears of Breath of the Wild expansion pass. All
I
of these ones they
think
could have been retroactively adding to this to give it value.
Well, and
for
there's been new
repeat
games that came out that
subscription.
had season passes that they didn't add to it either, which is bullshit.
Yeah,
Like it's
what's the
totally
point of
insane.
that? Yeah. It's just silly. But I forgot my original point now.
I think there's one other one.
Can't remember what the original point I was making was, but still, I just that's it. I would the only reason I've ever paid for Nintendo Online is if I was playing something online, and I haven't done for a while.
Yeah,
And to be fair, I don't think I was paying for it anyway. I'm pretty sure I was on Pixel Pass Family Plan for a long time, and he
yeah.
kicked me off last year for the first time, and that's when I suddenly noticed, like, oh, hang on a minute, I have to pay for this, and I just never did it again because
You're right. It's just those 3 games,
yeah, and that's the expansion pass,
which is like
Um,
garbage. It's
yeah,
just
and they
like
never added any more like systems to it. They never like went, okay, here's GameCube, or here's maybe another Sega one, or another handheld one, or even here's like a string of Game Boy Advance games. It's just not a service. I mean, I'm sure Trendy Brenny didn't mean for this conversation to turn into this, but I've been holding this in for so long that I have to say it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I think that's ultimately where I'm at with it. It's like I think it just needs more
Yeah,
value. It needs to
but
have
I
a
also
deeper bench of games. For sure.
yeah, but I do come at this from the position of someone who dislikes the idea of playing for online anyway. And when I had to, mate of mine was like, "Can you come and help me in this boss on Elden Ring?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." Went to log on and was like, "Oh no, I actually have to download." So I actually have to pay £6 to be able to do that. I was like, "Do you know what? He's my buddy. He needs help. I'll hop on and do it." Hopped on to do it, paid it, and then for the next 4 months, I kept getting "You've paid £6.99." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not even using it. This is so frustrating." And then I just forget to do it, obviously, because
Yeah,
I'm a moron.
been there.
And then I'm just like, ugh. And also like I know if I don't pay for it for like a year anyway, I'm gonna lose all my cloud saves if anything happens to the PlayStation or if I get rid of it, blah blah blah. Whereas when I get the Steam Deck and I play on Steam, great. I booted up my copy of Half-Life 2 I haven't played since 2011, and the game is exactly where I left it, for free. Hey ho, that's a different conversation.
So we had two other questions here today about Tears of the Kingdom, right? And the fact that it's been about a year since release, and we're about at the end of the show here. So I'm gonna save these ones, and I think let's save these for next week. If there's not a major news story next week, I think maybe we could do a little Tears of the Kingdom retrospective.
Sounds good to me because I do not see that happening.
Right? I mean, what else is happening next week? Probably nothing. So I think it's perfect.
Another acquisition, maybe. Who knows?
I mean, hey, if that's the case, we'll talk about it the following week. We'll be like, a month ago, it was the year anniversary. We'll get to it. We'll get to it, is my point. Both Don Devious and Andrew Valentine had questions about Tears of the Kingdom. And I'd like to talk about it a year removed and have a little dialogue there.
What we should do is clip our Game of the Year discussion where we talked about Tears of the Kingdom and put that on YouTube as its own thing. For the year anniversary. That's recycling content right there, boy.
And that's how you do it, frankly. You know. All right, gang. So if you want to write in with your thoughts on Nintendo's acquisition of Shiver Entertainment, what studios you think they should acquire next, or whether or not they should acquire more studios, I'd love to hear from you. Write in and let us know. And I guess if you want to get some questions in for next week's Tears of the Kingdom retrospective, you could write in about that too. And if you got any specific questions, thoughts, or feelings a year removed from perhaps the greatest game on the Nintendo Switch, I'd love to hear them. So make sure you write in. And you can do that by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you'll find links to all the places we are all over the web, whether you want to come join us on Discord and keep the conversation rolling between episodes, or you just want to write into our email address with your thoughts and questions. You can get your thoughts read on the air during our question block, or you can go check out a bunch of other cool ways you can get involved. Go tune in one of our sister shows. Come chat in the Discord with some other gamers just like you. However you choose to get involved or show your support, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nintendo Noise. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.